पंजाबी जागरण एसोसिएट स्पॉन्सर ऑफ प्राइम डिबेट हुण तुहाडे शहर विच।
Hello and welcome to Prime. We also welcome the views of G Punjab in the US. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Petrol prices to go up by rupees 3.14 paise per litre from Thursday midnight, second big hike in 4 months. Chandigarh fails to weather the rain, heavy downpour turns the city beautiful ugly in few minutes. Chief Minister Badal denies bungling in SGPC funds. Sukhpal Singh Khera wants greater transparency in Gurbani telecast. And it's a day and night news impact. Jammu and Kashmir government imposes Section 144 after report on illegal sand mining on the Ravi in Kathua. And now news in detail. Oil companies will hike petrol prices by about rupees 3.14 per litre from midnight tonight. This is the second big hike in 4 months. The decision was taken after a meeting of the heads of oil companies. Petrol prices have been raised because of the weakening of the rupee against dollar. Oil retailers claim they are losing rupees 15 crore per day due to the big gap in global and domestic prices. In Delhi, petrol costs rupees 63.70 per litre and it will shoot up to almost rupees 67 per litre. To discuss this, we have in our studios Upinder Sawhney, Professor of Economics, Punjab University, Chandigarh. Good evening, ma'am. Fourth hike in petrol prices this year, and LPG is also on the agenda tomorrow. This is coming at a time when the industrial production has slowed down and global economy is turning sluggish. Are you, as an economist, how are you viewing this?
It's a very complex phenomenon because as an economist my view would be different, but as a citizen or a housewife my view would be different. Now, as an economist, because of the rupee depreciation, this was inevitable. And if we look at this hike, this is really something which is not within the control of the government at this point of time, because the oil companies otherwise would be running into huge losses, and they are not ready to incur any more losses, and petrol in our country is heavily subsidized.
Right.
So, from that point of view, there was no choice, because it's becoming dear only because of the depreciation of the rupee. And the LPG, of course, that is going to upset the budget of a common man in a very big way, but again it is still highly subsidized. But all this is happening at a time in a very quick succession when probably it is impacting other areas.
Well, what kind of impact do you see on an average, middle class family?
It's going to have a negative impact on a middle class family in terms of their budget. It's going to really upset that. However, we have a lot of, subsidy on diesel still continuing. So we need to probably decontrol diesel a little and have dual pricing for diesel to compensate for all these things, because you know that the luxury segment of cars is diesel guzzlers,
right,
and they are paying the subsidized price on diesel, so that's not really very fair. So probably we'll have to do some kind of equitable focus on pricing of diesel, LPG and petrol.
So do you think that the government should revisit import duty on crude oil to offset the increase?
That's another issue, because you see we have a huge fiscal deficit. So reducing the import duty will have an impact on fiscal deficit, and we need to balance all the things together. So no doubt that the LPG hike is going to have a cascading effect on several other areas of the economy and our life, but I'm not too sure whether import duty can be reduced at a point where we are suffering from fiscal deficit. We really need some other hard decisions to take and look into this aspect.
So what is your anticipation about LPG? Do you think it's going to go up like petrol?
I think it will, yes.
It will?
Yeah.
Right. We'll move on to another story. In a major step forward to check corruption, the government has accepted the first report of the group of ministers on corruption. Henceforth, ministers will no longer have discretionary powers in the allotment of land, telephone and petrol pumps. Regarding corruption in bureaucracy, it has been proposed that mere retirement will not be a ground for dropping proceedings against corrupt government servants who will now face a 10% cut in pension in case of minor penalty. A 3-month limit has also been fixed to grant sanction for prosecution of corrupt officers. To fast-track cases, it has been decided to eliminate certain tiers in the consultation process. Also joining us for discussion is Mr. H.C. Arora, lawyer at the Punjab and Haryana High Court. Good evening, Mr. Arora. Now, the GOM has met and recommended some steps to check corruption, like setting up of special courts to try such cases. Are you satisfied with what has been proposed?
What I have read in newspapers, they are taking 3 steps. First is to open some more fast-track courts. Nobody can have an objection to that. But other 2 decisions are, I would say, full of contradiction. This is a fraud on the people. For example,
why do you say so?
Yes. For example, already under the civil service rules, central civil service rules, under Rule 8, there is a provision that if somebody is convicted on any criminal charge, his entire pension can be forfeited. So now to say that only up to 25%, starting with minor penalty 10%, that is a fraud on the central civil service rules. Rather, in view of the magnitude of corruption being faced by the country and the popular demand to give life sentence to such corrupt people on conviction, the minimum that the government could have done was they could have added a proviso to the CCS rules to the effect that in cases of corruption, whole of the pension shall be forfeited. Already the competent authority has power to forfeit whole. Now to say it shall be 25% for the corrupt public servants after retirement, that is total fraud on the people. Second, to say that 3 months time limit has been set up for giving prosecution sanction, it is again a fraud on the people. The reason being, in the government version of Lokpal bill, also it has been categorically suggested that no prosecution sanction will be required for prosecuting a public servant except in the case of ministers and members of parliament.
Okay.
Now to say within 3 months a sanction for prosecution shall be given, it means that government is not serious about what they have proposed in the Lokpal bill. This is totally suffering from inner contradiction. One stand in Lokpal bill, another stand before public.
So you say that the government is not serious?
Not serious, not honest on this.
I beg your pardon. What else do you think needs to be done?
Sanction should be totally done away with, even in case of ministers and the members of parliament, whereas the Lokpal bill suggests that only in case of public servants no sanction will be required. So that is the step required to be taken, instead of saying that within 3 months sanction shall be granted. And the other provision is totally negative. Rather, as I have suggested, under the All India Service Rules or under the Central Civil Service Rules Rule 8, a proviso should be inserted to the effect that in case of conviction on charges of corruption, whole of this pension shall be forfeited. Earlier it is discretion, now it should be made obligatory. These are the steps to be required to be taken.
Upinder ji, let me have your opinion also on this. What do you think about all?
No, I agree with what he has said, that there should not be any kind of amnesty to any class of people in case of corruption. As he said, that 25% for forfeiting of pension is hardly a kind of a punishment, because you know they would have made much more money during corrupt practices that they were indulging in. Rather, so they wouldn't even mind giving up 25% pension.
Right.
So that is really an eye wash, I guess.
Okay.
So we need to have tough measures on that.
Right, we'll move on to another story now. In a bid to bring back black money stashed in foreign banks, the government is working on a voluntary disclosure scheme. This amnesty scheme will offer a window for bringing back undisclosed assets stashed away in overseas tax havens into the country's financial system. The offshore voluntary compliance scheme will cover Indian organizations, citizens and non-resident Indians, and offer immunity from criminal prosecution and imprisonment, besides lower rates of interest and penalties. Also, the authorities authorities will not insist on the source of the money once it is disclosed voluntarily. But in case the tax department tracks down undisclosed assets through its networks, the holder of the money would face legal action. Upinderji, let me come to you again. There is a development on bringing back black money. The centre appears to be contemplating an amnesty. So do you think that's a good idea?
No, that's not a good idea at all, because this has been done earlier. There used to be some voluntary disclosure schemes off and on during the 70s, during the 90s as well. And they have not really helped the nation in any way. Rather, they encourage the corruption in the sense that the people who are honest, so that means they are being taxed, and they are the ones who are, getting all the pain of inflation and other things.
Right.
Whereas the people who are dishonest, they get away with it, if not today, maybe after a certain period of time when they get this kind of an amnesty. So therefore, it really encourages other people to do this, because they know that in the long run, nothing is going to happen.
Right.
And when they get back the money, and they disclose the money, I really don't know how much of it goes to the government and how much of it gets frittered away here and there.
Right.
So it's not a very good idea.
Mr. Arora, do you agree with Upinderji, or you have your view on this as well?
I fully agree with Madam Upinderji that such schemes only encourage dishonesty, as we have seen in the case of loan waiver schemes in the banks also. Only chronic defaulters get the concessions under those schemes. Under these voluntary schemes also, only dishonest people will get concession. And it appears to become a trend that such schemes are brought generally only to give some benefit to the corrupt. The reason why I am saying so is that under normal statutes, for example, there is a statute, Standards of Weights and Measures Act. Under that statute also, if somebody is violating the law and he accepts his guilt, he is convicted, though no prosecution in the sense that no sentence is imposed. But if second time he commits the same thing, sentence can be imposed.
Okay.
But in case of corrupt, you are saying immunity from prosecution, immunity from sentence. It can be immunity from sentence at the most, but no immunity from prosecution. Rather, the admission or disclosure, it should be treated as admission, confession, and it should be convicted straight away. But no sentence should be imposed. If something is found against him at later stage, then sentence should also be revived. That should be the system. Otherwise, it will become a flop, and after some few years, again the dishonest people who invest in foreign countries, they will again wait for another scheme.